Picture this, a perfectly manicured Texas mansion on a crisp morning in January 2019. 3 bodies are inside, and there's a frantic 911 call from the homeowner. But as officers arrive at the sprawling Anaquis Springs estate, they notice something deeply chilling. You see, the man standing on the lawn, covering his face in what looks like absolute agony, well, he doesn't have a single tear in his eyes. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into an intensely suspenseful true crime mystery where a seemingly perfect digital timeline just completely clashes with the physical evidence. Inside that massive home, detectives discover the bodies of 37-year-old Nicole Olson and her 2 young daughters, 16-year-old Alexa and 10-year-old London. A handgun is lying right beside Nicole. At first glance, the official story kind of seems to write itself, right? A tragic murder-suicide. But then, right in the middle of this devastating crime scene, Nicole's phone lights up, and it's just this completely mundane text message from a salon coworker that says, "Your client is already here." That one simple message, it literally shatters the entire initial narrative. Okay, let's dive into this. Because honestly, this question is the thread that unravels the whole shebang. Why was a woman who supposedly just wiped out her entire family actively making plans for her workday? She was confirming appointments, organizing her schedule, just hours before. To really understand how one of the most secure, gated homes in Texas became a slaughterhouse, we need to take a hard look at exactly who was living under that roof. Part 1. 2 very different worlds. So, Nicole Olson and Charlie Wheeler's paths first crossed back in 2016 through an Instagram direct message. And what started out simply enough quickly evolved into a relationship defined by a pretty disastrous power dynamic. Just consider the massive financial imbalance here. Nicole was this fiercely independent mother. She fought her way out of $24,000 in debt, practically living at the salon just to support her kids. And Charlie? Well, he was an oil fortune heir and a former rodeo professional, bringing in an estimated $160,000 in a single day. Let that sink in. Yet, when Charlie offered to just pay for everything, Nicole flatly refused to quit working. She instinctively knew to avoid total dependence. However, Charlie's immense wealth came with a very different set of rules. You see, his history with law enforcement reads like a literal masterclass in evading consequences. We're talking public intoxication at a country club, a drunk driving incident where he allegedly mocked a police officer, fled on foot, refused a breath test, and, get this, couldn't even count backward from 30. Yet time and time again, these charges just magically vanished. They were dismissed, reduced, or replaced with minor fines. That kind of treatment insulates a person. It creates this dangerous, almost untouchable mindset where the rules, they simply don't apply to you. Which brings us to Section 2, Trapped in a Gilded Cage. That untouchable mindset inevitably bled right into their home life. The 4,500 square foot Anaquis Springs mansion quickly morphed from a dream home into a pretty restrictive prison. The sources detailed this chilling escalation of coercive control, all hidden behind private security gates. We have Nicole arriving at photo shoots with unexplained bruises covered by makeup. An anniversary trip down in Galveston where Charlie just abandoned her, leaving her entirely stranded without luggage or even a phone. GPS tracking her every move at basketball games and jazz clubs. Public humiliation over a dropped piece of pepperoni, of all things. And maybe most telling of all, over a 12-month period, police patrol units were dispatched to that mansion 4 separate times. Nicole's isolation became almost complete. It was so incredibly apparent that her friend Vanessa actually made this devastating observation on her way out the door one evening. She said, "You look like a guest in your own house." And Nicole's response? It was quiet and honestly super chilling. She just nodded and replied, "This is Charlie's house, not mine."
Moving on to Section 3, the final countdown.
But here's the thing. Nicole wasn't passively giving up and surrendering to this control. She was actively, methodically building a secret exit plan. Let's trace the ticking clock of that day, January 9th. And this brilliantly illustrates what was really going on. In the morning, she gets approval to sign a lease on a brand new separate apartment. In the afternoon, she's confirming a salon appointment for the very next day. By 9 p.m., she's happily discussing an upcoming TV talent show audition for her daughter, London. So I have to ask you, does this look like the timeline of someone preparing to end her own life? Every single data point shows a woman walking toward freedom, not the end. Now for Section 4, Digital Evidence Tells All.
So what actually happened later that night? Well, Charlie claims he came home, they got into a massive argument, and he simply drove away to stay with a friend. But the digital trail tells a remarkably different story, and it exposes some massive holes in his alibi. First off, if you truly feared your partner was in severe emotional distress, why on earth would you leave a loaded firearm within easy reach, especially knowing 2 young girls were upstairs sleeping? The gun belonged to Charlie. It was routinely kept in his nightstand without the safety on. And, any of his fingerprints or DNA on that weapon could be so conveniently explained away by daily contact.
Then look at his actions right after he supposedly fled this intense argument. Instead of going to sleep, he starts creating this really meticulous paper trail. He's sending a wave of text messages to Nicole, her daughters, and her brother, carefully documenting his concern for her mental state. The logic here is just totally bizarre. Think about it. A man fleeing a dangerous emotional situation spends the night texting his girlfriend's brother to document his worry instead of simply dialing 911 for a welfare check on the house he just left. It really doesn't add up. And then there's this highly suspicious digital artifact. Around this time, a text comes from 16-year-old Alexa's phone to Charlie's phone saying, "Are you here?" I think she's talking to herself, ending with a frightened face emoji. Now, why would a terrified teenager text the homeowner asking if he is inside when he supposedly just stormed out after a screaming match? And ask yourself, doesn't that message fit a little too perfectly into the exact alibi Charlie was building? So, the crucial point here is the chilling reality of modern digital evidence. A touchscreen doesn't preserve fingerprints on a virtual keyboard. Technology can definitively show a message was transmitted, sure, but it absolutely cannot prove who was physically holding the unlocked device. Literally anyone standing in that room could have drafted and sent that text message. As the clock moves closer to 11 p.m., we hit a really haunting number: 4. Exactly 4 outgoing silent calls are placed to 911 from Nicole's phone. Only one of them successfully connects, but there's complete silence on the line. No screaming, no whispers, just dead air right before the connection drops. This forces a deeply unsettling question that frankly shatters the official timeline. Were these the final, desperate calls of a dying woman? Or was this someone handling a phone, scrubbing the call logs, and accidentally triggering the automatic emergency SOS sequence? Remember, the security cameras at the gates do capture Charlie's vehicle leaving, but the timeline strongly suggests he left only after all these critical events seemingly unfolded inside. Which brings us to Section 5, a bitter irony. Despite all these glaring red flags, the conflicting timelines, and that bizarre digital footprint, the county medical examiner quickly and definitively ruled the case a murder-suicide. And almost immediately, frustrating roadblocks popped up everywhere. Charlie quickly hires attorneys and just stops cooperating entirely. He never even reached out to the grieving fathers of the young girls. No definitive gunshot residue tests, GSR tests that would prove Nicole fired the weapon were ever released to the public. The local sheriff even used a press conference to publicly repeat unverified paternity gossip. Ultimately, the grieving fathers of Alexa and London were forced to file civil lawsuits just to fight for some basic transparency. Years have passed now, and the case remains officially unresolved. But it forces us to ask a really tough question. How easily can wealth, privilege, and isolation rewrite a crime scene? Did the private gates and cameras meant to protect this family actually provide the perfect, silent alibi for a killer? The walls of Anaheim Springs sure didn't protect Nicole, Alexa, or London. But those cameras did record a highly convenient exit time. You've got to trust logic, look past the official story, and never, ever just accept convenient coincidences. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything.